Hey everybody, Corey Frills here with the LTW Group. Welcome to our podcast. And today I have my friend Nick True with me. And thanks for coming.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here, man.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
I'm going to go traditional and read your bio.
Okay.
So okay with you?
I'm ready.
All right. Nick True is a financial coach specializing in cash flow optimization. He's passionate about helping people use their money to do more of what matters to them. After years of traveling full-time in an Airstream, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was fun.
Nick and his wife, Hannah, have settled in Tennessee with their 2 cats and 2 dogs. Nick shares his insight on budgeting and using money to do more of what matters on his YouTube channel, Mapped Out Money. He also co-hosts the Mapped Out Money podcast, so go in and check that out. We'll have a link for that to discuss all things personal finance and money management. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
I met you through a
mutual friend in town.
Yep, a networking kind of thing we threw together.
Yeah.
I guess more like just some guys hanging out.
Yep.
And super interested in your business and what you do. We've talked a little bit offline, but it would be beneficial for all of us to hear. Really, I think the interest. Read this, and you have a part about an Airstream in there. So let's just take it from the top.
Okay.
Where are you from? Where'd you go to school?
Cool.
And
so I grew up in Cleveland, Tennessee, which is just like an hour south of Knoxville, hour-ish, and went to school in Chattanooga, so UT Chat, little baby sister school on the UTK here. Met my wife there, and I got a degree in mechanical engineering.
Okay.
Mostly because I was good at math, and because that's what my family that was the path.
Be an engineer.
You know?
Right.
And so that's what I did. Got out of school, got into a job, had a good job, good setup. It was going fine, but I realized very quickly that it was not for me. Mm-hmm. I needed to chart my own path. I wanted to start a business. I wanted to get out of engineering and do something else. And I'd always had this love for teaching. And I taught piano lessons for 3 or 4 years, kind of did that to put myself through college. And then I tutored math and did ACT prep. So I always had this kind of heart for teaching. And I got really, really into personal finance and budgeting. And actually in high school, started reading personal finance books and investing books and just got really into it. In hindsight, I don't know why I didn't go into finance in college, but I think, again, it had to do with just family and societal expectations around sort of what I'd been pushed into, which is fine. We make decisions like that. Long story short, I started a blog back in 2015, and it was called True Tightwad, kind of a play off of my last name, and it was fun, and started writing about personal finance and writing about what my wife and I were doing. We were newly married. We got married very young. Took a couple of years doing that. My wife graduated. She ended up taking a job as a travel physical therapist after she got through a PT school, and I was making enough money on the side now that it wasn't enough to support us, but it was enough for me to go all right, if I could just work on this full time, I think that I could really make a go at this. Mm-hmm. And Hannah started working full time as a PT, and so she was able to kind of support us for a bit while I took that leap. So I quit my job, we got into the RV, we started traveling based on her kind of locations, and that was in 2017. And then I spent the next few years building the business, and it's been a really, really fun journey. And so these days, I run a YouTube channel and a podcast. My wife has since quit her physical therapy job and now works with me and co-hosts our podcast. And we talk about budgeting and personal finance, and I help people make decisions with their money.
That's awesome.
That's what we do.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What personal finance book did you read in high school?
When I was in middle school, I took a Crown financial class at our church.
Okay.
Larry Burkett, kind of.
Is that like halfway Dave Ramsey?
It's pre-Dave Ramsey.
Pre-Dave
right?
Ramsey.
So Dave Ramsey kind of owns that church market now.
Yeah.
Larry Burkett was that in the 90s.
Okay.
And so I took a Larry Burkett Crown financial class. And I mean, they're still big, but people don't know them as much as Dave. So that kind of got me interested enough. And then I read I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've read that or heard of him.
I didn't know that book was that old.
Yeah, it came out when I was 18.
Okay.
When that book was first published, and that really shifted my perspective around not just hoarding money or being frugal and cheap and tight, but this whole idea. Ramit calls it a conscious spending plan, and so his whole thing is we want to think through and figure out what are the areas of your life that you really enjoy spending money? How do we actually crank those up? He calls them money dials.
Yeah.
And how do we turn that dial up? And that really influenced me in a huge way because I started looking at my finances not as just like being frugal and not being trying to sort of building wealth for the sake of seeing a number grow up, but actually thinking through like what the money could help me do. And then that led to some different investing reads and all kinds of stuff in college.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. I came in late on the Ramit train, so I've watched some of his content. Is the book he's kind of
he's aggressive.
He's aggressive.
Yeah, the book's aggressive. So that's why I think I don't recommend that book to everybody, but I think at 17, 18 when I read it, it was what I needed to hear.
I get that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you're kind of like a punk teenager and you're like, I don't want to listen to like, stodgy financial advice.
Sure.
And Ramit's like telling ridiculous stories about, his parents and his dad and dating, and he's telling all these like kind of off the wall aggressive stories, but it makes it fun in a way.
That's
and so I love giving that book to like, if parents ask me what they should have their kids read, like I love recommending that book because that aggressive tone is actually, I think, attractive a lot of the time to make it not feel so stodgy.
Yeah. The first book that I read on money was Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah.
So old book.
Yep.
I mean, the book was old when I read it.
Yeah.
The book was what I needed at the time.
Yep.
I wholeheartedly disagree with a lot of the things Robert Kiyosaki says.
Yes. But
wholeheartedly.
Totally.
But at the time, it did change the way that I viewed money.
Yes. It's a big mindset shift.
Instead of, I'll never forget in the book, they make money. His dad's like, you need to learn to make money, and they melt down aluminum cans and stamp coins. Remember that?
Yep.
And he's like, you're on the right track. That's actually a crime, but you're getting where I like where your head's at. So, anyway, that makes perfect sense what you said. What you read at the time is sometimes what you need.
Totally. It's like Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek.
Absolutely. It's a great book.
I read that book when I was, I guess I was 20, maybe 19 or 20. And that book totally, again, just like blew my mind, totally different way of thinking. And there's a lot about it now that I'm like, I wouldn't do that, or I would think differently. But like at the time and the context of where I was in my life, it was a huge unlock.
It made me way more efficient.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. I love that. That's awesome. And you've morphed this thing from a blog
Yep.
to, and I think it's worth noting, 15, you started the blog.
Yeah.
17, you had enough.
Yeah.
Like not enough to jump.
No, like we're
but
talking
enough to be like, this is possible.
This is possible.
2 years.
Yep.
How how often did you write?
I mean, I was writing weekly at least. And what's also important to point out is that so at 2015, you have to recognize I'm 21, 22 years old. Like, who wants to take advice about personal finance from a 22-year-old?
Yeah, right.
And so like, I'm writing, and it's even more of a documenting like of what I'm doing, what I'm trying, what I'm testing out.
Just a journal.
Yes, almost a journal. No one's like looking to take advice from a 22-year-old, and I knew that. And so I actually, because I was so desperate to get out of engineering, I actually used the blogging almost as more of a resume to show my web skills of like, I can build a landing page, I can do marketing, I can write. And so when I actually first quit the job, I wasn't even making money through doing coaching, financial coaching and helping people with money. What I was making money on in 2017 was freelance work. And so I was making $1,500 to $2,000 a month, which is obviously not livable money, but put that with what Hannah was making, we're fine. And I was doing personal finance writing for other people's blogs. So I actually had a partnership with a financial advisor, and I was writing some blogs for his website. And then I scrounged up another couple freelance gigs where I was doing some writing or some loose web marketing work. And I was doing freelancing from 2017 to 2020. I didn't go full time doing like what I do today until January 2020.
Wow. And that was an interesting time.
That was an interesting time to go full time. Yeah. I quit all my freelance gigs in January 2020.
You're like, this is fine.
2019 went really well.
Yeah.
And so Matt Tomlin is doing good. And so I'm like, all right, I'm good. I stop.
I don't need this.
And then
Don't call me back.
The world kind of blows up.
Yeah.
And actually, we're really blessed because of what we do. And this is kind of a weird thing to say, but because of what we do, when the economy goes down, when people are stressed, when the market goes down, we actually see an increase in business.
That makes sense.
Because they realize, oh, I need to maybe budget. I need to maybe look at my finances a little more closely.
Yeah.
I need to get help with managing my money. And so we saw a huge dip initially in March of 2020. And then in April, we just saw a big uptick. And so 2020 we ended up tripling the business from 2019 to 2020.
That's awesome.
Which was crazy. It was totally wild.
And you were a nomad before nomads are cool.
I was, yeah. We were doing the nomad thing pre-COVID.
Yeah, that's cool too. That's really cool. Where was your favorite place you landed for a while?
We spent. So I'm going to give you two answers. Number one is we spent 6 weeks outside of Glacier National Park in Montana.
Yep.
And so it's in
That's
Kalispell,
cool.
Montana. We spent 6 weeks there. It was wonderful. It was amazing. It's beautiful. And every little pocket in the country is so beautiful. Like East Tennessee is beautiful for what it has. But Montana is also beautiful and it's totally different. And so like growing up in East Tennessee, I'm used to seeing like forests and trees and like green and the mountains. In Montana, you go up and you get out there and it's just like open. And it's crazy. I mean, they call it Big Sky for a reason. You just have this open, the sky is humongous. So it was really cool. But a lot of people know about that. And so my second that I like to tell is Boise, Idaho.
Okay.
Which is, we ended up going there not because we planned, but we used to pick our travel spots based on conferences. So a lot of different finance or personal finance or marketing conferences I would attend. That was how we kind of had to maintain a semblance of community on the road because it's kind of weird if you don't do something. So we would pick out our spots based on conferences. There was a conference that was held in 2018, actually where I met Austin, who we know here in Knoxville. I met him at that conference in 2018. So we went out to Boise and we spent like a week and a half, 2 weeks in Boise. And I didn't know anything about Boise other than like potatoes. That's, that's all I know.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. It was one of the most fun cities we have visited.
That's
cool. We loved it out there. I know it was really, really cool.
That's awesome. That was a big pandemic boom state too.
It was.
Obviously.
Yeah.
If it's a great place to live, people found it.
They figured it out.
Yeah, that's awesome. What conference was that?
It's called Craft and Commerce.
Okay.
It's run by a company called ConvertKit, which is a software email marketing tool. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So you'd probably see the same people.
I did.
At these conferences.
Yeah. Because we would go to 3 or 4 a year, and so I would meet people, and then you're going to that conference? Cool. Yeah, I'll see you there in a few months.
That's cool.
It was kind of a neat way to still have a thread of community, like I said. Yeah.
That's awesome. So, all right, in your business now, what's an ideal client for you? Like when you're interviewing a potential client, or maybe they submit a form, or however you interact with them.
Yeah.
When you read it, when you're like, that's a strike zone, that's somebody I can help.
Yeah.
This is going to be great.
Yeah, good question. I would say middle, we're going to say like middle class to upper middle income, right? So let's say household income of 60, 70K a year to let's say 200, 240K a year, something in that range. I know that's like a big range, but when it's really, really low income, there's just quite frankly very little you can do from a money management standpoint.
Right. You got to make more money.
You need to make more money, right? And I can help you with money management, and there's certainly some efficiency we can squeeze out, but your biggest lever is going to be increasing income.
Yeah.
And so once you've got like an okay amount of income, all the way up to like, nice high income, that's somebody that I could really, really help because of a lack of inefficiency. And so that's the first thing. And then the second thing is they have to have a really strong and compelling reason for doing this. And so what I mean is almost nobody comes to me to work with me when life's going great, like financially. Right. And they're just kind of going, oh man, like I need $6,000, $7,000 a month to live. I make $15,000 a month. Life is wonderful.
Sure.
Like no one comes to me like that. Almost everybody is, I'm about to get married. I'm about to have a kid. We're buying a house. I'm moving. I got a career change. I just got divorced. I'm about to retire. They've got some sort of life change, some big life event that's happening or has just happened. They're freaking out and going, oh man, I'm stressed. Money feels like it's going everywhere. A lot of people will say things. If I hear this phrase, I'm like, I could really help you, is the phrase, we make good money, but I just don't know where it goes. Like, it shouldn't be this way.
Right.
And that's somebody that I can really, really like make some big progress with.
Yeah. Yeah. So where do you start when you client comes in? I made good money. I don't know where it goes.
So
what's the next step?
The first step, I like to call it sort of turning on a financial GPS, so to speak. And so we're just tracking the money for the first month. And so a lot of people think of the word budget as it's like a 4-letter word. People hate it. They don't want to. I don't want to budget. That feels restrictive. That feels like no fun. I don't want to do that. And so initially out of the gate, we don't do any budgeting. We simply track your money. And so if we're using like a road trip analogy, if I decide I want to take a road trip to Boise, I'm here in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I'm like, you know what? I want to go to Boise, Idaho. And I get in my car, I throw my phone out the window, and I just start driving west. Hope I make it. Odds of me getting anywhere near Boise are probably pretty slim.
Yeah. There's no signs for Boise, Idaho.
Signs for Boise,
until
Idaho.
you're in like, you're gonna very close.
Very close. Very close.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think the first step is we just got to turn the GPS on. We got to figure out where we're at.
That's right.
And most people are driving around their day-to-day life right now with no clue where they're at financially.
Yep.
And so we track your money. And so what that looks like is setting up a very basic category structure. I use a budgeting tool called YNAB. It's short for You Need a Budget. I don't work for them. I don't have like a relationship with them, but that's just a tool I like and use.
Yep.
And so we set that up, and we set up a very basic structure that's tracking their main bills and their groceries and their eating out and their gas and all their stuff. And I try really hard to encourage people to really, seriously, I don't want you to change anything for your first month. Just live. We're just going to track it. We're in a data collection phase. And so that's really the first step, because we got to get a baseline. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Do you find though that when people are watching, when they're tracking, they do change behaviors?
They already start to change a little bit. They already start to change a little bit. Especially, it's funny, like the accountability thing too. If they know that they have a meeting with me scheduled for 2 weeks, and they're like, Nick's gonna look at this, right? See, my job, I get very intimate with people very quickly.
I bet.
Right? Yeah. I've got clients where I see where their money's going more than their spouse sees where it's going. You know, and so I learn things about people very quickly in terms of what's important to them and what they care about. And so absolutely, people start to go like, ooh, I'm going to have to talk to Nick about that.
Yeah. Well, especially if you automate it, where it's not like a journal where you could lie.
Yeah. You can't.
You know, you can't.
It's hooked to the bank account.
It's hooked to the bank account, you know, unless you're spending cash on the side. I mean, we're going to know we're going to know that there's cash coming out.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So just being aware
already starts to see a shift.
Will change people's behavior.
For sure.
In a good way.
Yeah.
Okay. So then once you've done that, you have data to look at.
Yep.
And I imagine this is where it gets individual for other people. Is there a time? Okay, you just tell me. What's the next step? What would you do next in your process?
So the next step, a lot of people think, and this is what people fail at, a lot of people jump from tracking to, all right, what are we going to change? Maybe I need to cut back here, or maybe I need to trim this over here, or cancel that subscription there. And we don't do any of that. The second step is we do what I call a life vision, or we create a plan. And so back to our little road trip analogy, GPS style, we're putting in the location. Now, instead of putting in Boise, Idaho, I'm putting in like the street address that I want to get to, the specific place that I'm trying to go on my little road trip here. And so this is where what I do, and I really don't like this term, but it's where what I do starts turning a little bit into life coaching. And I take people through a process where I'm asking them questions about like what they want their life to look like in the next year, in the next 3 years, in the next 5 years. And we kind of bucket them into life, family, relationships, and then finance and wealth and career. So we have kind of 3 buckets. And we just start literally writing out bullet points of like, in your life, what hobbies do you want to pursue? What places do you want to travel? What habits do you want to build? Do you have any health goals that you care about? What about your mental health? What about your physical health? What are you thinking about those things? What about your spiritual life? Do you go to church? Are you involved in a community anywhere? Do you do any of that? Great. And so we get all that in there. And then we say, okay, what about family and relationships? How old are your kids? How old are they going to be in 3 years? What things do you hope to have passed along to them in 3 years? What skills do you hope to have helped them build? Or what experiences do you hope to have given them? What about your parents? How old are your parents? How often do you want to see your parents? How often do you want to see your grandparents? And so we really go deep on like painting this picture of what you want your life to look like. We do the same thing with your career, and we talk about big decisions like moving or not moving, all kinds of stuff. And this is where like I become sort of a sounding board for them. And my job as a coach is really just to ask questions and help them think through the things that matter to them, the things that they care about. So then we come up with this life vision document, and it's got kind of a 1-year vision, a rough 3 and 5 year vision, and then at the bottom we have a bucket that's just future dreams, bucket list places I want to travel, things I would like to do one day, stuff I'd like to pursue in my career, experiences I want to have, what age I definitely want to retire by, all kinds of things. And so then once we have that document, the third step is where we just simply pull up the document, we pull up the tracking data that we've been tracking now for a month or two, and we just go, all right, are you using your money to do the things that you care about, the things that you've told me are important to you? Mm-hmm. And almost always the answer is no.
Yeah.
And so now, in light of that, let's put your money where your mouth is.
Sure.
What, based on this document, do we want to change about the way you're spending your money or the way you're using your money so that we can make the document, the vision, happen?
Yeah. What kind of, we've known each other for a little time now, and I feel like you're kind of an introspective kind of guy, or maybe you're a thinker. Mm-hmm. So you probably see themes among your clients just as a collector of data.
Yeah.
Right? What's a very common theme that you think, a common theme that you think is valuable, but then two, maybe the second piece would be a theme that might surprise people.
Interesting. Okay.
We can do one at a time.
No, yeah, it's good. So a common one, I would say, this is going to be a little bit vague, but I'll give examples, which is like a common one would be some semblance of freedom and flexibility with their time. And so typically this can look a little bit different for different people, but that's a theme that I see a lot. Mm-hmm. And so let's keep in mind, what I'm trying to get people to do is I'm having them, at the end of the process, they're changing behavior a lot, right? We're really cutting back on certain types of spending so that we can increase other types of spending. And that's the beauty of it, is like, we're not cutting back for the sake of cutting back, we're cutting back so that we can do this other thing that really matters.
That's right.
And so we have to get very clear on what it is that's going to compel us to do that. So this theme of flexibility and freedom, a really common example that I see would be like, my job is crushing me. I travel all the time. I feel like I'm never at home with my kids. And I want to figure out a way to be able to say no to certain work trips, or maybe even shift jobs, or change jobs to one that has a little bit more freedom and flexibility. But my money, I've got these golden handcuffs over here. I'm so strapped. There's no way that I can't take a pay cut. But I'm scared to even maybe look and see if something else is out there because I'm not sure. I feel sort of trapped. I don't have enough flexibility and freedom to do the things that I want to do, which might be time with family or friends or whatever. And so that becomes a theme that I see a lot, where we go, all right, cool. Well, how can we tweak what you're doing financially to give you more of a buffer, to maybe help you see that you don't actually need to make quite that much, to where we can make that shift? Mm-hmm. Or maybe it's, you want to do that for your spouse. Maybe your spouse wants to be able to quit their job or work part-time, and you just don't see any way possible currently. And so then it becomes this, how motivated are you to make that happen? Mm-hmm. And are you willing to make some changes to do that? So that's one. That also comes in the form of retirement as well. So it's funny, when I got into this, I set out first and foremost because I was in my early 20s. I was like, I want to help people in their 20s be set up. The problem with building a business around people in their 20s is they don't have a lot of money.
Right. Yeah. And they need the most help.
But
they can't
necessarily afford to pay. And I have to eat too, right? And so that sort of makes building the business tricky. And also I found that they don't have strong enough whys a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. They don't have
retirement's like forever away.
Forever away.
You're never going to retire.
Forever away.
That's right.
And for a lot of parents, their why is like giving their kids opportunities, or for retirees, it's something else. And so a lot of my clients, probably 30%, 40% of my clients are in their 50s and 60s. They're on the cusp of retirement, or they just hit retirement, and they're now living on a fixed income, and they're trying to figure out how to squeeze as much of their, sort of the juice out of life on what they've got. And so for them, this becomes a freedom and flexibility to do the dreams that they always had, that they're not sure if they're going to be able to pull off. And so that's where, again, it's this theme of like, how do I have the freedom to, visit my kids and grandkids the amount that I would like to, or the freedom to finally take that bucket list trip that I've always wanted to take. And so it's still this freedom and flexibility theme that I see a lot. It just is sort of manifests in different ways.
Sure. Yeah, I can understand that. Do you think that's generational?
Could be, yeah.
Or maybe the expression of freedom is generational?
Yes, I think it definitely looks different, and it's probably generational, and it's also probably just season of life, right? It just looks different when you've got 3 young kids versus in retirement versus when you're in your 20s.
Yeah.
You're just optimizing for different things.
Are you familiar with Professor Scott Galloway? He's got some really good content, right?
Yeah.
So I don't even know what he does, but I've seen his social content. He's just a really interesting guy, says interesting things, and engages via video. He has podcasts and some other things. But one in particular, he says that your happiness in life is like a smile. It's like an upside down bell curve.
Yeah.
So it's like when you're in your 20s,
awesome.
everything's awesome. It's like newlywed and honeymoons and freedom and out of school, or even when you're in school, it's like school's fun and summers and and then you have a couple kids and man, life just gets to be a grind in your 30s and 40s. Your kids get a little older and you're empty nesters and you're in your prime earning years and you got some resources and it's kind of this upside down bell curve, if you will.
Yeah.
And he was just talking about how just being conscious of that, this is not abnormal.
Yeah.
This is just how life is.
Yep.
Is helpful. And so that's when I think about the expression of freedom is very different, where it's so funny because I in my early years of my career, and I'm a mortgage lender, so there's that. I sell money for a living. And I've always been in finance in some form of capacity. But it was all math to me.
Yeah.
It was like, there is no reason you should ever pay off your 3% interest rate mortgage.
Yep.
There's no reason. It just, makes more sense for me to stack liquidity elsewhere and I can make more in the market and all these things. But I can even see at 33 from 22. I'm like, dude, if I had no debt, if I had no mortgage, that would be awesome.
That security kind of.
And I know that mathematically that makes no sense at all. I even look at my car loan's cheaper than my mortgage.
Yeah.
And I could pay it off with probably 2 turns of capital. And it makes no mathematical sense, but I'm like, man, it would be cool.
Yeah.
Not to have any car debt.
It's so nice.
And so it's interesting how the expression, because that's freedom.
So I got this client. I've been working with her for 4 years. And when she first reached out, she had sold her business in California. She went to Paris and she was like, I want to spend 6 months here. She reached out because she was nervous, right? She's never not had an income. And she's in her 50s, so she's not got Social Security yet. She just got this chunk of cash. Reached out to me and was like, I want to figure out how to budget so I can live in Paris for 6 months and not have to think about what I'm going to do for work next, at least for 6 months. I was like, great, we can make that happen. And so we start working together and I start really digging into her numbers and I'm like, hey, like, I think you're, depending on what your goals are and your vision is, like, there's a lot more flexibility that we can kind of build in here. And I start learning about her dreams, and she's got all these long-term dreams where she wants to like hike the Camino de Santiago, which is this incredibly long hike across Spain. That's a big dream for her. She's also got all these other little trips she's always wanted to take in Europe and parts of South Asia. And then she wants to write. She's always had dreams of being a writer, writing short stories, maybe some fiction, maybe some memoirs. And it's something that she's always kind of dabbled with, but never really pursued because, she was in her business and trying to make money and trying to live and do stuff. We start working together, and through that, I end up helping her navigate to a financial advisor that knows deeply the sort of nuances of being an expat, living in France, and how to navigate some of that. Long story short, 4 years later, she's hiked the Camino, which she spent like 30 days just alone on this trek. And she's actually doing it again. She's going back in September this year to do it. She has not gotten any job. She hasn't gotten any new income. She sold her house in LA. She rents in Paris. And she's in a comfortable spot where, like, she could live the rest of her life without having to work if she sticks to the budget and the game plan that we've made. She may decide to pursue getting paid to write, but right now, writing for her is just a form of art and a hobby that she is pursuing. And it's kind of insulting to call it a hobby because she's pursuing it with a professional sort of focus, but it doesn't have to make money.
Sure.
And it allows her to have immense amount of freedom to pursue the interests that she has and do stuff that she wants to do. And so what she's doing right now is she's using this time in her 50s to do a lot of travel and do a lot of stuff that she's always wanted to do, knowing that she may not be able to travel that way in her 70s. Sure. And she may not stay in Europe forever. She might move back to the States. But for now, that's what she's doing.
Yeah. So this is an interesting piece here. So you talked about 4-hour work week in the beginning.
Yep.
And one of the things that 4-hour work week kind of hinges on is that your decisions are not permanent.
Yes.
Like you think that these choices you make are going to ruin your life.
Yep.
I say this all the time. Every time I've changed jobs, I'm like, I've ruined my life. I feel like I've really blown it.
Yeah.
I feel like I've really blown it for probably 6 months.
Yeah.
And so that sense of permanence to decisions, I think, keeps people from making a lot of choices. They just really should, because there are very few things that are actually permanent.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
So the question that and I think it's Tim Ferriss that asked this, but at least it was the journey he put me on that led me to wherever it was. They're like, what would it take if you left your job?
Yeah.
What would it take for you to get the same job? And it's like, well, you could probably get the same job back.
Probably figure that out.
You could probably get the same job back, right? And so I remember when I left, my first job was in personal banking, and it was a salary. And when I left that and came into mortgage, which is 100% commission, that was how I had planned. And I looked at, I negotiated a guarantee for as long as they would give me. I think it was 7 months of what I made, and which doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
Like that was 2014, which was not a good time for mortgage, nor is now. But anyway, you don't get 7-month guarantees anymore. And then I had enough in savings to ride me out the next 5 to get me through my year contract, so I don't have to pay the 7 months back.
Got it.
And that's how I was like, okay, I can do this.
I can figure it out.
And I know I can get my entry-level banking job back anywhere pretty quickly. So I think that going through that thought exercise of what could it really, if I did leave this secure thing that I have, what would it really take to get back to where I am right now?
Yeah.
And often I don't think it's as much.
It's not nearly as much. We have these like existential fears where we're like, if I do this, I'm going to end up homeless under a bridge.
Sure.
And it's like, no, that's not, like, that is so not a realistic scenario.
Right.
Like there's so many things that could happen long before you end up homeless under a bridge.
Sure.
Where you're going to go, it's not what I'd prefer, but it's fine.
Another Tim Ferriss concept is fearscaping.
Yes.
Where you'll let your deepest, darkest fears, you'll chase them to their ends.
Yeah.
And then what you typically find is they're not all that scary.
Yeah.
You know, the actual in reality is not like,
it's not horrible.
It's not. It's not that bad.
Yeah.
You know, there's, fortunately, we live in a country that there's plenty of opportunity for rebounding. And getting back up. What do you think for? Let's talk a little bit about current market conditions.
Okay.
We'll just have. I don't think there's an answer to this, so we'll just have a conversation around. Yeah. Maybe there is. Maybe you can solve it, and then I would be.
I'm about to solve it right here.
That would be great.
You ready?
I can't. It's difficult for me to make sense of financial data that is being reported. So like what I see on CNBC, the market data reports from the BLS and other reporters of data, and then what I'm seeing in practice.
Yeah.
And so, and I don't know if that's, the world is probably darker for mortgage lenders now than it is for other businesses, right? Because most impacted by interest rates.
Yep.
So it could be that, but the data that I'm seeing and then the reality that I'm seeing are not adding up, in that we're still adding jobs, but most of those jobs are part-time jobs. We're not adding full-time jobs. We have credit card debt at an all-time high.
Yep.
Over $1 trillion in car debt.
Yep.
As a country. And then the fact that we're adding part-time jobs leads me to believe that people are taking second jobs. Summation of this data that we're getting is we still have a strong economy.
Yeah.
And it just does, it feels odd to me. And I don't know if you're seeing the same thing. And I don't know if you, I'm curious on your position of whether you follow national news or if that's noise to you. Or, and then if you do, are you seeing in your practice variance there as well?
So I am very careful how much national news I follow. I follow it enough to not be uninformed, but I recognize, I think ultimately the thing that makes the world go round, so Charlie Munger said this, but incentives run the world. And so I think the incentive structure fundamentally inside of national news organizations is not good.
Charlie Munger has as many good one-liners as Warren Buffett does.
Yes.
He's
they're phenomenal. Phenomenal. And so I'm not a big fan of national news because of the way the incentive structure is. I don't think that they're always necessarily incentivized to report the truth. Let's leave it there. So I pay enough attention to kind of have a pulse a little bit on it, but I'm much, much more interested in like you said, what my clients are seeing like day to day on the ground, what's going on. And it is kind of fun because I work remotely and I take clients anywhere. I have a lot of clients all across the country. I have clients in different countries. Like none of those things stop me. And so I do get to see a little bit across a number of different markets. So I don't know if this answers your question, but I'm seeing a lot of like tightness across day-to-day stuff. So the inflation that we see on a national level that's getting publicly reported, I think it's massively underreported.
I see.
Based on what I just look at in people's budgets. These are people that budget well, manage their money well, and I've watched their groceries skyrocket over the last few years. I've watched their spending for kids' clothing skyrocket. I've watched like normal day-to-day expenses significantly increase. And so, yeah, people are maybe getting jobs and everything you just said, but I'm seeing like just commodity stuff. I'm just watching it go up. And so that's when I look at the news and I go like, meh, I don't believe that number because I can just look at people's grocery budget and I can see how we've had to massively increase it over the last few years. And then ultimately that impacts because it's not just the interest rates that impact what you can buy a house for. Like that's the thing, right? Is that like when your grocery budget for a family of four goes up 50%.
Yes.
That
it was already $1,000.
It was already $1,000. We're talking about $500, $600, $700 extra a month.
That's right.
That can't go to a mortgage payment. Yes, you got to eat.
That's right.
And so not only are the interest rates and the home prices causing like immense amount of stress for people that are trying to buy, you've also got just like all the other stuff has gotten way more expensive. And so that becomes very, very tricky. And this is where a lot of my coaching, because I don't think there's a lot that my clients can do to affect or impact the market, right? They're not going to be changing it. And so they've got to just deal with it. And this is where I have a lot of hard conversations around expectation setting. And then the other thing, I know this isn't exactly your question, but this is like very practical to me for like when I'm in the market for buying. Are you familiar with the jar and the rocks and the sand and the pebbles analogy? Okay, so imagine that this coffee cup right here is a mason jar. And imagine that on this table, I've got like 2 or 3 bigger rocks, maybe like a golf ball size rock. And then I've got some pebbles. And then I've got a little jar of sand. And I hand you this and I say, Corey, I want you to fill it up. Here's the stuff, fill it up. And if you reach down and you go, I'm going to put all this sand in here. And you put all the sand in there and maybe that sand fills it up to here. And then you grab the pebbles and you put the pebbles in here. And then all of a sudden you're like trying to fit these golf ball sized rocks in here and they're not going to fit. And I say, yeah, you did it backwards. So then we dump everything out on the table and we reach back and we say, all right, start with the golf balls. Let's put the golf balls in first. And then let's take some of these pebbles and put the pebbles in. Then let's take the sand and let's dump the sand on. Okay, so the analogy is we're going to apply it to like buying a house. And so for buying a house, for any specific person, family, there's 2, 3, 4 non-negotiable must-haves. I must be able to do this for my house. I will not buy a house that doesn't have these. We identify those first. And so one of those is always budget. Like, what's the maximum you can afford? What's the maximum mortgage, not that you can get approved for, but that, like, actually friggin' works for you.
That's right, that you can pay.
That you can pay.
Yesterday on a client intake call, client discovery call is the marketable term.
Yep.
Intake is for jail. On a client discovery call, asking the question, do you have a target monthly payment? Well, no, I was hoping you could tell me what I could qualify for.
Yeah.
And we just will not do that.
Yeah.
We're just not going to do it. So then what we have to do is we have to start giving them numbers.
Yeah.
Okay, what about $4,000 a month? Oh my goodness, no way.
No.
Great.
It's working out.
$2,000 a month?
Yeah.
That's the top.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. $1,500. That feels great. Okay, so we have a range now.
Yes.
$2,000, $1,500.
Yes.
You have to.
Yes.
Yes. So sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's exactly right? So that's one of the rocks.
That's
We
right.
got to put that rock in first.
That's right.
And then we say, okay, what are the other rocks? It might be number of bedrooms, might be number of bathrooms, might be location, might be age of the house, might be size of the house, might be it's got to have a basement for my gym, like whatever it is. We identify those first because I've realized a lot of people, you're willing to give on a lot of things.
Sure.
If you can get the number one thing.
That's right.
The very first house Hannah and I bought, we paid $297,000 for this house in November 2020. It was 50 years old, needed a lot of work, real fixer-upper, a ranch-style home, but it was 0.6 miles from my favorite coffee shops, the downtown stores that I loved, and the bay. Mm-hmm. That's why we bought that house.
Yeah.
We cared, our big rock is location. So for me and Hannah, number one, budget. Number two, location.
Yep.
Then we got maybe one or two other big rocks. Then the pebbles. The pebbles are the nice to haves. Oh, it has hardwood floors. Oh, it's already painted a color I like. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's got kind of the kitchen layout that I was hoping for. Mm-hmm. Those are the nice to haves. Those are the pebbles. If we get them, great. But if we don't, we can do without. And then the sand is all the other little bitty fun stuff. Mm-hmm. And if we put those in the right order, and we build and make decisions around them, what you realize is like you can actually condense the amount of like price of home you might be willing to buy. You can manipulate the budget. You can make this work and get the things that you care the most about if you identify them and hold a constraint and prioritize them.
Yep.
Whereas if you just start like putting sand and pebbles and stuff in here, you'll end up buying a house where you get to the end and you look back and you go like, crap.
Yes.
I didn't optimize for the right stuff.
Right. Yeah. That's a great analogy. I'm going to steal that one.
Please do.
You probably took it from somebody else, right?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I didn't make it up.
I love it. That's awesome.
So I don't know that answers your question about the market and what I'm seeing, but what
It does. I think that an interesting point about inflation that comes to mind is when we peaked at 9% in 2022. I think that was June or July of 2022. And that's when I went into full panic mode because I knew it was coming. Like I knew what was coming. I knew what the next 2 years was going to look like after we hit that number. And now we're at 3, and I think you would look at that and be like, "Oh, prices have come down," but they're not.
That's not how the math works.
Inflation is the rate of acceleration of prices.
Yes.
So they were going up at 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 8, 7, 6, still going up.
Yes. It's just the rate.
Still going up.
Yes.
And so that is why inflation is such a thief and it's so dangerous.
So
and it's why the Fed has taken such dramatic action.
Yeah.
Is because inflation is just so dangerous.
Yeah.
Problem, I think, and I am not a fan of the Federal Reserve by any stretch of imagination, although I don't blame them for taking dramatic action. They were just late.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just the Federal Reserve, and it wasn't one political party. Both political parties were complicit. And you had the definition of inflation is too many dollars chasing too few goods. Mm-hmm. So we shut down the supply chain, and then we dumped a bunch of money in the economy.
Yep. What do you expect?
That is the definition. I mean, we were in private wealth. I was in private wealth at the time. with some of the smartest people in Knoxville, Tennessee on the team. Not me. I relied on them. And I remember us sitting around a table being like, okay, businesses are shut down. You have PPP going out to businesses to keep employees for not working.
Yep.
You have
SBA loans that are easy to get and like low interest at first and pay it back whenever you feel like it.
You have the Federal Reserve pushing mortgage rates to all-time lows, buying every piece of debt, buying corporate debt, consumer debt, treasuries, all of it. Rates at all-time lows. And you shut down the supply chain.
Yeah.
I feel like that's going to cause some inflation.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we knew then
Yeah.
that it was going to be an issue. And so the fact that it took them until March of 2022 to take action, and then again, PPP was not the doing of the Fed.
No.
There was a lot of political pressure to drop interest rates at the time. The supply chain shutting down was not the doing of the Fed, right? So it's not all their fault, but their reaction and a non-reaction to the data is frightening for the most powerful people in the world. Like, they are the most powerful people in the world.
Well, and again, so going back to the Charlie Munger quote, right? Incentives on the world.
Sure.
This is where, like, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I know how to run a better country.
Sure.
But one of the inherent problems in our cycles is that presidents and then senators, representatives, and all the way through the chain are judged on very, very short time
Short
spans.
durations.
And so what happens is that we're in an election year right now.
That's right.
And so everything is like, basically, how can we make people think that we feel that we're the right candidate before November?
Yeah.
And then, even if in November, whoever gets elected, again, what are they optimizing for? Just the next 4 years.
The next 4 years.
They don't give a crap about 20 years from now.
Yeah.
And so the problem with, like, the inherent structure is the decisions that are being made today have impacts for decades from
That's
now.
right.
But no one is held accountable. There's nobody that's looking at the way things are in 2020 and then going, well, you know what? There was a decision that was made in 1972, and really that was sort of the chain of events that like, we're not actually holding people accountable for those kind of decisions, and I don't even know how you would. But the problem is the incentive structure is so short.
That's right.
It doesn't take time to run through the system.
We could really hit a tangent with this. I mean, it's true in corporate, in publicly traded companies, quarter to quarter.
Yep.
You're not even 4 years.
It's
you're not
insane.
1 year.
One quarter
it's
to
quarter to quarter.
It's nuts.
And this and there's a lot of data on why family businesses last so long.
Yeah.
That are privately held is because they think long.
Yes.
Instead of short.
Yeah.
That's a podcast of its own.
Oh, totally.
That's awesome.
There's one of my famous stories. One of my favorite stories is that really challenges my thinking, because I try really hard to think long term, and I'm challenging myself even to think longer term. I might butcher the story, but I think it's 1100, 1200 AD, something like that. What is now today Guinness Beer bought a piece of land on like a 1,000-year lease or something like that to set up shop for their first distillery. And I was listening to a podcast when they were talking about this, and they're like, can you imagine thinking on such a timeline that you're like, all right, I'm starting this brewery, 1,000 years.
Lock it in.
Lock it in.
20 shekels.
Sign me up. Like, it's such an we just don't think that
Wow.
way. Like, our
That's
country's
amazing.
300 years old.
Yeah.
Like, we
Not
just
even.
don't think that way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. All right. Where can people find you? And
Yeah. I mean, the easiest thing is to go on YouTube and search Nick True or Mapped Out Money. Either one, pull us right up.
Yep.
My wife and I co-host a podcast that's on YouTube. It's also anywhere podcasts can be found.
Sweet. We'll have that link in the comments
Perfect.
too. And anything you want to say before we shut it down?
I don't think so. I appreciate you having me on, man. It's a weird time. You know, we've done a lot of moving ourselves over the last couple of years. We've got a lot of clients that, like, moving is always a big part. And then my in-laws just sold their home here in Knoxville, and they're moving. We're about to put a property on the market. I mean, so I'm paying a lot of attention to it just for my own personal and then for my clients. It's a weird time. And so, I don't know that I have anything else I want to say other than just really encouraging people, like, the harder it becomes to get the mortgages that you need to make work for the houses that you're looking at, the more and more and more the best thing that you can do is really think through what your vision is for your life, and then questioning the expectations that you have around, like, I must have a home of this size, in this condition, in this way, with these finishes, in this, because the reality is life requires trade-offs, and when things are tough, you got to be more thoughtful about the trade-offs you're willing to make. And like, I know that you, one of the things I love about you and what the team does is, like, you're not just, like you said, you're not just trying to like sling mortgages out to anybody who can get approved for whatever. You're trying to make sure that they're not going to make a decision that's going to ultimately come back and bite them.
Absolutely.
And part of that means sometimes you got to have hard conversations about trade-offs.
Yeah.
And what you expected that you're going to get because that's what your neighbors got, or that's what your parents, or that's what you grew up in, or whatever. Sometimes we got to reset those expectations. And I know that's tough to hear, but it becomes a lot easier when you can get clarity on your vision for where you're going.
I love it. I love it. That's awesome. Thanks for coming, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. Tune in, guys, to the next one, but this one's really good. Let us know what feedback you have and how we can do things better. And thanks for watching.